retroactive benefits are not the same. You can't eat retroactivity. You can't afford medicine retroactively. Businesses can't survive retroactively. Now the Republicans have decided to push an approach that the administration's own Labor Department rejected as unworkable. So if the Republican plan can't work, then the stark reality is that the Republican plan remains cutting off the $600. What kind of leader punishes unemployed workers in the midst of a crisis? The harm to families and businesses is not theoretical. In the last recession, we let emergency unemployment benefits lapse, and the harm to individuals and retailers was immediate and substantial. In Illinois, if Republicans let the $600 expire, the average benefit will be cut by 63%. Hardworking Americans deserve relief. We must protect workers and families. We must do it now. There's no time to wait. There's no time left. Now is the time, and we must act immediately. Now I'd like to present Representative Kildee from Michigan.
Thank you, Chairman Davis and to Speaker Pelosi, Chairman Neal, joined by Mr. Evans and Ms. Chu, both of the Ways and Means Committee. Appreciate all your efforts. We're here today with one message for the President and for the Senate Majority Leader, Mr. McConnell: do your job. Millions of Americans are at risk of losing everything that they've worked for, and the only thing holding them together has been this unemployment benefit, and the only thing that prevents them from keeping it is the inaction of this President and of the United States Senate. COVID-19 is simultaneously an economic crisis and a health crisis. 140,000 Americans have lost their lives. 40 million American workers have lost their jobs. These simultaneous crises are far from over. Yesterday, for the 18th week in a row, over 1 million people filed for unemployment benefits. Our unemployment rate nationally is over 11%, worse than the Great Recession. And in my home state, it's one of the hardest hit states. 2 million Michiganders have lost their jobs. We have passed legislation. We're not just having a conversation, we're legislating. Someone once told me a long time ago, you can't fund a conversation. We passed a bill that protects these important benefits. And in addition to that, provides other critical support for testing, for frontline workers, for state and local governments, for schools, and extends that $600 a week benefit. For months, Republicans have failed to act. They know everything they need to know to make a decision on this question. But the HEROES Act sits on Mitch McConnell's desk gathering dust. Why isn't there any empathy from these Republicans? Millions of Americans are about to lose everything that they've worked for and not be able to put food on the table, not to be able to take care of their families. And the Senate Republicans are literally dining on alligator sausage and crab bisque while Americans are trying to figure out how they're going to put food on their own tables. Because of their inaction, we now find ourselves staring down tomorrow's deadline, where Americans will stop getting that essential lifeline. This pandemic is not over. This is no time to tell the American people you're on your own. So even as we begin to reopen parts of the economy, in some cases obviously too quickly, but even when the economy does begin to reestablish itself, the jobs won't come back as fast as they were lost. Unemployment will still be a significant problem, the highest levels we've seen since, and now eclipsing the levels of the Great Recession. Without this action, 25 million Americans, again, could lose everything that they've worked their lives to create. Every one of these dollars matters to these families. And as Chairman Neal said, this is not just about supporting those families, but this supports the American economy. Imagine taking away this lifeline. it not only put those families in jeopardy, but it takes significant spending power out of the economy. Without this unemployment benefit, unemployment goes up in this country, and the problem gets worse. I've heard from thousands of my constituents. We were chatting before coming out here. All of us, for the most part, the majority of the calls we get have to do with unemployment benefits. And I just want to mention a couple of these folks. Rick from Bay City, Michigan, wrote to me to say, quote, "Please vote to extend the $600 unemployment. It's been a much-needed lifeline. It helps with basic needs like housing and medicine. We nearly lost our home and everything. We do not know what we are going to do without that extra $600. Stopping these payments seems cruel. We're barely hanging on." Jeffrey from Saginaw wrote to me, basically the same story. He said, "I'm still making far less than I did, but I'm at least able to get by." Crystal from Burton said, "I fear my children and I are going to be left homeless and without food. I just don't know what else we'd do." These are the stakes. These are the stakes. This is about real American lives that are going to be affected permanently. Do we want to create the first generation of another round of multiple generation poverty? No, we don't. And we have acted. The leader in this effort and all of our efforts has been our leader, the Speaker. And she has been just dogged in her determination to get this done. So it's my pleasure to bring forward our leader, the Speaker, Speaker Pelosi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kildee. Thank you, Chairman Neal. Thank you, Chairman Davis. Thank you all for focusing on this very central issue, an issue that goes to the heart of the kitchen table concerns of America's working families. We can talk about a number of things. Time. Everything is about time. The time it has taken for the administration to recognize that you should wear a mask. The time it took, 98 days, just under about 100 days to reach 1 million people infected in the United States. Half that time to reach 2 million, 43 days. 27 days to reach 3 million people, 16 days to reach 4 million. Terrible. Terrible. And Congresswoman Chu, as I say, Mr. Chairman Davis, thank you, Congressman Evans, Mr. Kildee, and Mr. Chairman Neal for bringing us here. We keep saying you want to open the schools, you want to open the economy, defeat this virus, and yet, delay, distortion, denial has taken us to a place where we have 4 million people. And there are many other concerns that we have of state and local government having to fire people. And the list is a long one of concerns that we're trying to address that Mr. Davis rightly calls really injustices in how they disproportionately impact communities of color and the rest. But right now, we are focusing on this one subject, the extension of the unemployment insurance benefit. This is central to the well-being of America's family. What do the Republicans and the White House have against working families in our country that they would begrudge them $600 of absolutely necessary sustenance? There are other things in here too. It's about paying the rent, and it's about buying food. So with this package, we have people on the verge of eviction. We have millions of children starving, food insecure in America. We need the food stamps and the rest, and they resent that. We had legislation in the HEROES Act and independently to help with rent so that people are not evicted. And we have this money in the unemployment benefit. So I thank the members of the Ways and Means Committee for always recognizing the connection between our policy and the health and livelihood, the lives and livelihood of America's working families. As Mr. Kildee said, we hear calls all the time, people crying on the phone, crying on TV, crying, they're in pain. It's about their dignity and how they meet the needs of their children. And why? And why? Because the Republicans are derelict in their duty, taking off for the weekend instead of being ready all these months without preparing something to begin with. When we had our offer, they make their offer. Now 2 months and 8-10 days have gone by, and where are they? And where is their offer, which earlier this week they said we would see in 24 or 48 hours? They're in disarray, and their disarray is causing great, great damage to America's working families. This is an alarm that needs to be sounded as loudly as possible about what are we doing here if we are not addressing the needs of people who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own. And as Mr. Davis said, they tell them to go to work. Go to work. You're an essential worker. You must go to work. And when you go to work and there are no protections, you have no recourse. And if you don't go to work because you're afraid that you're going to bring the infection home to your children, you don't get unemployment insurance. But Mr. Neal, the distinguished chairman, he has always been there for the people who need it the most, as countered by the Republicans who are there for people who have the most. So when they talk about $600, I want to review the fact that they put $2 trillion onto the national debt to give a tax break to the wealthy, 83% of the benefits to the top 1%. I'll close prayerfully, quoting St. Augustine. Some of you have heard me say this almost every day. St. Augustine, 1,700 years ago, he said, any government that is not formed to promote justice is just a bunch of thieves. Let's use our time to remove all doubt that we're going to do the right thing by the American people so they can meet the needs of their families. Everybody wants to talk about being family friendly. Let's not squawk about $600. With that, I yield back to the distinguished chair of the committee, or whoever's leading the way here.
Questions? Please.
Will you pass a bill to invoke a short-term renewal of these benefits so that they don't lapse for Americans?
Speaker's call, but I will tell you this, the Ways and Means Committee intends next week to hold a hearing on unemployment insurance.
Yeah, let me just say this. We have food stamps in there, and they're like, what? You want more money for food stamps? We have housing in there. What? You want money for housing? We have this benefit in there. I would be very much averse to separating this out and lose all leverage for meeting all of the other needs. It's a fraudulent tactic and with all due respect to you, an unworthy question when it comes to meeting the needs of America's working families. But I'm glad you're having the hearing to keep the spotlight on it. What is the point of they could have done their job, as you said. Do your job. I mean, this is dereliction of duty and our responsibility to the American people. And now you're saying, why don't you just bail them out so they can ignore all the needs that we have for testing, all the needs we have for state and local government, all the needs we have for food security, all the needs we have for OSHA benefit that is in the bill, all the needs that we have for vote by mail and other priorities that we have that are about justice.
I understand all that, but are you considering extending these benefits for a month or two while you continue to negotiate?
No.
The point being, the Republicans have every bit of information they need to make the decision.
You understand? No.
You know, for people who are at home, but what should people, people who are at home wondering how they're going to afford their groceries next week?
Pass the bill.
That's the bill.
And a
That's
good
it.
bill. I mean, that's the thing. It's really a good piece of legislation if you go through it with the retention tax credit and all. It's really a good piece of legislative work.
It's a tactic in order not to honor our other responsibilities.
That's right.
We will not be a party to their tactic. If it's on this subject, let's stay on this subject, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
It's on the subject, so I guess we can get anyone, but, Senate Republicans want to keep their bill within $1 trillion. Given money for education, more money for PPP, et cetera, when you bring in the unemployment insurance benefit of another $600, do you think it is possible to extend that benefit at that level and keep a bill within $1 trillion?
And What we said to the Republican, I'm going to tell you something. This is deadly serious. A house is burning down in terms of the economic security of America's families, and these people are fiddling wherever they may be this weekend. So when you talk about, well, they want to do $1 trillion, so how can we do $600 for those in the most need when they got other things they want to do? But that's why Chuck and I, the distinguished leader and I said to them, put your bill on paper. Put your bill on paper, and then we'll see what you have included and what you have left out. And then the American people will see what you have included and what you have left out. But I'm telling you, you can't have any more patience. You know, it's a wonderful thing I read. It's amazing how much patience people can have with other people suffering. Well, we don't have that patience on our side of the aisle. And so for them to say $1 trillion, when they spent $2 trillion to give a tax cut to the richest people in America, 83% of the benefits, to the top 1%.
Which is borrowed. They borrowed the
Yeah, they
money.
borrowed it. They heaped it on the backs of our children for future generations. So let us see what their $1 trillion gets them. And what are they excluding? They have nothing for state and local, where people are working, healthcare professionals, food suppliers, transit workers, teachers, sanitation workers, people who make our system run. Over 1.5 million of them have been fired already because of the needs of coronavirus, the expenses of coronavirus, and the revenue lost because of coronavirus. Take that out, let those people go. Okay, so now they don't have jobs. They probably have to go on unemployment, right? So what money have they saved? And then we have testing. They shut down their cafeteria the minute somebody got infected in the White House complex. They shut it down. They're testing and tracing. Why can't they put that money there for the states in a substantial way with a strategic plan to do that? So what money do they have there for that? Then we have the money for rental assistance and mortgage forbearance and food stamps, as I keep saying. The one thing I just can't understand is how they could even show their faces by saying, food stamps, you want more money for food stamps? Why would we do that? Well, because people are hungry in America. Doesn't that motivate you? So $1 trillion, that our bill, 3.4, mean and lean. It's everything we need. It's nothing extra. So let's see where their $1 trillion takes them, and not have them use that as a reason why they can't give America's working families $600. Don't get me started on that $600.
You know, I think it's important. It's important to note, though, even if somehow the Republicans can't conjure some empathy for these families, which is hard to comprehend, they ought to at least be able to comprehend the fact that to the extent that this economy has been barely held together, it's because these families have had this unemployment benefit and the spending power to go down to the corner grocery store and to pay their rent and to take care of their families. That money goes directly into the U.S. economy. So even if they can't figure out a way to have sympathy and empathy for the families that would be hurt and harmed so much by this, they ought to at least enroll in an entry-level economics class and understand if you take that money out of the economy, this whole house of cards is going to collapse. And that's why they need to act now.
Thank you. On the issue of price tag, the HEROES Act passed 2 months ago plus, and conditions have changed on the ground, obviously. And
We need more money.
that was my question. Is 3.4 enough, given that a lot of parts of the country are suffering more than they were 2 months ago? And where would that be? I know you mentioned that education could use more.
If I may use your question, but to pivot from what Mr. Kildee was saying, we are a consumer economy. Our economy, it grows and succeeds and is strengthened by the consumer confidence that is there. They should know that. At the same time as they are spending trillions of dollars to bolster the stock market, so it has a floor, and that's not a bad thing. we should be spending trillions of dollars to have a floor for America's working families because it's the right thing to do, but it's also the most pragmatic thing to do in order where you put money into businesses. If you ain't got no customers, it's no use having money to pay the rent and the staff if there's no business. So this money is spent, it's needed, it's spent, it injects demand into the economy, and it creates jobs. So I just wanted to go back to your point. Okay, on education, for example, we need much more money. We had $100 billion in for education. We also knew that wasn't really quite enough, but we were trying to be lean and mean with the budget. And they came in with 105 this week, and they said, well, you have 500. But of course, you have to see where they want to spend that money. But we probably need double that much, at least double that much for education, for one thing. But by and large, we're in pretty good shape with what we have in the budget if we could spend it now. Now, they want to do zero for state and local. Really? Tell it to the governors and mayors across county executives across the country. We have to have that money. They're not going to be at $1 trillion. And if you see their $1 trillion list, it's really going to be a big embarrassment to the Republican Party to see who they cut out and who they include, and how they were willing to spend double that for a tax cut for their rich friends. Anybody else on that? I'm making that question.
Madam Speaker, I heard you say, directed to you, but anybody can answer, and I'm following up on Nancy's question. I heard you say no multiple times,
Yeah.
but isn't this issue on a different level in the sense that it is immediate, it is going to expire, and that some of the other things, while also important, funding for elections and funding for education, isn't going to have the effect that Mr. Kildee has described his constituents are worried about?
Well, if you were going to be evicted at the end of this month, you might not think the same way. If you were crying because you couldn't put food on the table for your children, you might be thinking a different way. That's why we have to have these, actually, a safety net for the capitalist system. Everybody says it's a safety net. It's a capitalist system safety net, so that they can wheel and deal and freeway. And then in the cycle of things, when people need help, there's a safety net for the capitalist system. So if we were going to have a capitalist system, which I fully support and want to strengthen, we strengthen it by removing all doubt that when things go one way or another, people are not going to have to explain to their children why they don't have food on the table. So this is very important. So you want to see how many people will be on the street being evicted because they cannot pay the rent, and then they can't pay the rent exponentially because they're not getting the $600. I'm just going to lighten up the mood here. I'm going to tell you this. Carl Reiner, great, you're all too young to know, but he was a great comedian, and his son, Rob Reiner, Meathead, maybe you're too young for that as well. Anyway, he died, a great comedian in his 90s, 98 years old. So I called his son, Rob, who is a comedian too. I called Rob, darling, this is Nancy Pelosi. I'm calling to wish you and Michelle my condolences. I'm so sad. Your father was so funny and so wonderful. I had the occasion to hear him. This man says, I think you have the wrong number. I said, really? I'm so sorry. I thought this was Rob Reiner's. He said, well, I know who Carl Reiner is and I know Rob Reiner is, but I think you have the wrong number. I said, well, I'm so sorry. Whether I talk to my staff about this. And he says, but I'm so glad you called me. I have one question for you. I said, well, what is that? He said, am I going to get my $600?
Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's speech yesterday
I'm very proud of her. I thought it was great. I have 4 daughters, 2 granddaughters, and I thought she was just great. It was, what she said is what we all know. A president of the United States who gives license to people to speak that way, who are at ease with that kind of disrespect, condescension, and the rest, and in keeping what the president was saying about his fear-mongering for women who live in suburbia and how he treated that. Fear-mongering, discrimination, disrespect, condescension. I was very proud of her. Thank you all very much. I have to go to my day job.
Guidelines?